Let me tell you a story about three blind historical figures, Dhritarashtra, Surdas and Bilvamangala Thakur. What's interesting is that their blindness was not just a physical condition. It revealed a deeper aspect of their identities and life experiences. Let's start with Dhritarashtra, the blind king from the Mahabharata. Now Dhritarashtra was not just physically blind. His real blindness was in his heart. He was so attached to his son Duryodhan that he could not see right from wrong. As a king, he should have stood up for justice, but his love for his son clouded his judgment. Duryodhan's greed and ambition went unchecked, and Dhritarashtra, despite knowing better, did not stop him. This blindness to justice, to dharma, ultimately led to the great war of Kurukshetra and the downfall of his entire family. Dhritarashtra's blindness then was not just a matter of his eyes. It was a symbol of how power and attachment can blind us to the truth. He had the role of a king, but his inability to see beyond his personal feelings led to a disaster for his entire kingdom. Now let's contrast this with Bilvamangala Thakur, a 12th century poet saint. Unlike Dhritarashtra, Bilvamangala was not born blind. In fact, his blindness was a choice. He was initially obsessed with worldly pleasures, especially his infatuation with a woman named Chintamani. But something she said sparked a transformation in him. She inspired him to turn his devotion towards Krishna. To help him shift his focus from calm to unwavering prem, that is, from lust to devotion, Bilvamangala blinded himself. It was his way of turning away from worldly distractions and turning his inner eyes towards the divine. In his case, the loss of physical sight was a conscious decision that opened the door of his heart, behind which the vision of eternal Krishna was shown. Then there is Surdas, another poet saint who was also physically blind. Surdas's blindness allowed him to see more clearly in another way. His devotion to Lord Krishna was so strong that although he could not physically see, his heart could see Krishna in all his divine glory. His poetry is filled with vivid descriptions of Krishna's charm and beauty. So for Surdas, his blindness was not a limitation. It was a gift that allowed him to connect deeply with God and express that connection through his poetry. So we see three very different forms of blindness. Dhritarashtra, who was blind to the truth, ultimately leading to his downfall and distancing him from Bhagwan Krishna. Bilvamangala, who chose blindness as a path to devote himself entirely to Bhagwan Krishna, and Surdas, whose inner eyes were always open to the presence of Bhagwan Krishna, even while his physical eyes remained blind. This reminds us that true blindness is not always about the eyes, it's about how well we can see what truly matters. Dhritarashtra's blindness symbolized weakness and attachment, while Bilvamangala and Surdas's blindness reflected spiritual strength and devotion. Let me share a quick micro story from the life of Shankaracharya, the great Advaita philosopher. This story offers a thought-provoking perspective on blindness, something our information-driven world really needs to think about. One day, while traveling with his disciples, he met a blind man who asked for help. One of the disciples volunteered to guide him, and on the way, they struck up a conversation. The blind man was incredibly knowledgeable about the Vedas and scriptures, reciting long passages and discussing philosophy with ease. But as they talked, the disciple noticed that the man was very rigid in his thinking. He refused to consider any ideas that did not fit his own, and he was quick to dismiss others' views. He was quite intolerant and judgmental. When the disciple returned to Shankaracharya, he mentioned how impressive the blind man's knowledge was, but he also pointed out his arrogance. Shankaracharya replied, "This man's blindness is not just of the eyes, it's of the mind. His vast knowledge has not led him to wisdom because his arrogance has blinded him more than the loss of his physical sight." This story shows us another type of blindness, intellectual blindness. Even if someone knows a lot, if they are closed off to new ideas or too proud to learn, they remain blind to true understanding. So it's not just about what we see with our eyes. It's also about how open our hearts and minds are to the world around us. It's like having eyes that see, but a heart that remains closed, with the inner eye still shut. In the end, the most dangerous form of blindness is the one that closes off our hearts and minds. Whether we are physically blind or not, the real question is, do we have the eyes that see with wisdom? a mind that is tolerant of what does not sit well with us, and a heart that shows affection to all? After all, it's the Lord within the heart of each one of us whom we exist to serve. Is not it fascinating how these stories illustrate that real seeing is not just about what our eyes perceive? It's about how deeply we connect with the divinity that cradles the entire world in its lap. True vision goes beyond physical sight. It's about opening our hearts and minds to the deeper truths that unite us all.